Fine, it's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Begins with a simple idea. Belief systems are allowed in a democracy. People can believe what they want and vote how they want. But the warning is clear. Denying what a candidate openly represents can backfire. Treating serious ideology like a passing phase risks losing elections. The message isn't about banning views. It's about acknowledging reality. When voters sense denial, trust erodes quickly. Politics, at its core, is perception mixed with honesty. Ignore that, and the ballot box responds harshly. The opening tone sets the stage.
Now, let me tell you about the story that liberal algorithms locked out. Her name is Sia Weaver, and if you ask anyone in the blue sky bubble who that is, they'll look at you like a turkey looking up at the rain. But she's kind of important in New York, being Major Mamdani's chief of the Office to Protect Tenants, and since Mamdani's big issue is the rent's too damn high, yes, he stole this guy's act. It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and so I assume stands with, someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists.
Commentary pivots to a larger concern. America is not a communist country, and many voters strongly identify with that distinction. Historical examples are used to argue how extreme economic shifts have hurt nations in the past. Low wages, inflation, shortages, and mass migration are framed as cautionary tales. The implication is not that history repeats perfectly, but that voters fear it might. That fear influences elections more than policy papers ever will. Emotional reactions often outweigh technical arguments, and campaigns that underestimate emotion tend to miscalculate outcomes.
Home ownership is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes, for co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism...
Attention then shifts to party branding and media narratives. Even when controversies arise that might normally boost a political party's visibility, public approval can still drop. The argument suggests messaging confusion normally boosts a political party's visibility. Public approval can still drop. The argument suggests messaging confusion plays a role. When leadership fails to clearly define its direction, opponents fill in the blanks. Viewers are urged to question why polling trends sometimes move opposite of expectations. The takeaway is that clarity wins trust.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Mayor Mamdani is a socialist or democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.
Lesser-known political staff figure becomes symbolic of a broader debate. The appointment of advisors and officials is portrayed as more influential than many realize. Critics argue that radical statements from associates can shape public opinion about entire administrations. Supporters counter that isolated quotes shouldn't define a movement. Yet optics matter in high-profile cities and financial centers. Leadership choices ripple outward beyond local borders. What seems minor internally can become major nationally. The clip emphasizes how personnel decisions often become political statements.
Fine, it's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist.
The focus widens to ideological labels like socialist and communist. The speaker argues that many Americans instinctively react negatively to those terms regardless of nuance. Decades of cultural memory and Cold War history still influence modern voters. Even if definitions have evolved, emotional associations remain strong. Dismissing those reactions as ignorance may deepen division rather than resolve it. Political branding, once attached, is difficult to shake. Language becomes a weapon as powerful as legislation. The warning is that labels can overshadow intentions.
Turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Debates within parties about terminology are highlighted as strategic vulnerabilities. Whether someone is called a socialist, democratic socialist, or progressive can change public perception dramatically. Opponents often simplify complex ideologies into punchy soundbites. Supporters argue that such simplifications distort reality. Still, elections rarely reward complexity. Voters respond to clear identities more than layered explanations. Internal disagreements, when public, can appear as instability. Unity in messaging becomes as crucial as unity in policy. Clip 7.
Socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that.
Persons are introduced to stress the stakes of ideological shifts. Examples of struggling economies are contrasted with the scale and resilience of the U.S. system. The narrative suggests that centralized control can hinder innovation and growth. Supporters of reform argue that social programs can coexist with capitalism successfully. The real tension lies in balance versus overhaul. Voters tend to fear sudden structural change more than gradual adjustment. Economic security remains a dominant election issue. The clip underscores how financial anxiety shapes political loyalty.
We have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders.
Discussion then turns to democratic socialism and campaign promises. Large-scale proposals often sound appealing in theory but face obstacles in practice. Pilot programs and smaller state experiments are cited as evidence of complexity. Advocates say setbacks are part of progress. Critics call them proof of impracticality. The broader point is that implementation determines credibility. Grand visions inspire, but execution sustains support. Without tangible success stories, enthusiasm fades. Politics ultimately rewards results over rhetoric.
Of COVID, masking 2-year-olds who never would have died from it and keeping schools closed for far too long. They're definitely afraid of their kids, who from time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. Their kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has
emerges. The United States already incorporates many social safety nets. Programs like public education, healthcare assistance, and unemployment benefits are described as partial socialism within capitalism. This blend has historically softened economic extremes. The concern raised is not about safety nets themselves but about expanding them too rapidly. Balance is portrayed as the key to stability. Too little support breeds inequality. Too much control risks stagnation. The middle ground becomes the battleground. Voters often seek reassurance that equilibrium will remain.
I don't know if we're still banning TikTok. That was before we changed the rule in America to Trump decides what's a law. But I know it wouldn't even be an issue if parents would sack up and tell their kids to get off the phone. Democrats are still afraid of the mean girls who police their far-out fringe. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton had a perfect score on LGBTQ issues from the Human Rights Campaign. But when he said, I have 2 little girls, I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete.
Cultural politics enter the frame as another source of division. Social debates over identity, parenting, and education are portrayed as alienating moderates. Critics argue that ideological purity tests push away centrist voters. Supporters claim cultural advocacy is necessary for progress. The tension reveals how social issues can overshadow economic ones. Campaigns that lean heavily into culture wars risk narrowing their coalition. Elections, the argument goes, are won in the center. Ignoring that center invites repeated defeats. Messaging tone becomes as important as policy content. Clip 11, parenting and generational gaps are used as metaphors for broader political hesitation. Leaders are depicted as cautious about confronting vocal fringe groups. When moderate voices face backlash, it signals internal pressure. The clip suggests that fear of criticism can paralyze decision-making. Strong leadership requires navigating disagreement without surrendering direction. Public confidence grows when officials appear decisive. Hesitation, by contrast, breeds doubt. The political cost of silence can equal the cost of controversy.